Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to be providing an update to the bull market support band. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Links in the description below. We are going to be raising prices on Into the Cryptoverse Premium after the halving. So if you do want to lock in the lower rate, make sure you do so before the halving because prices will be going up for Into the Cryptoverse Premium after the halving. Let's go to jump in. So Bitcoin is still at 69K. So essentially it's where it was about a week ago when I put out my last video. And again, my apologies for the absence over the last week, but I was out of town and I essentially had no internet connection. I tried connecting, but it was really difficult. And also, I thought my last video that I put out was probably the best one yet. It was only 30 seconds long, but it was straight to the point. And I think that, you know, I could probably do more videos like that, and it would probably be just as useful as some of these hour-long videos that I do. But again, this one's not going to be an hour long. We're going to try to keep it to a more modest, I don't know, 15 minutes or something, but we'll see. Bitcoin's currently coming in at 69K. The 20-week SMA is all the way down at 52.6K, 21 EMAs at 54.5K. In my absence, we actually had a little bit of a sell-off by Bitcoin, but note still it was able to stay above the 8-week moving average. So again, as long as it does that and we're not getting multiple weekly closes below it, sometimes you get a fake out here, just like we got back in earlier this year. But as long as you're not really getting like multiple weekly closes below it, where you're getting a close below the 8-week and then another close even further down, the move can continue. And if you look at what happened in 2019, it was when the 8-week broke, where it finally meant that we were due for a correction. In 2021, it was when the 8-week broke that we were finally due for a correction. So I would still keep an eye on the 8-week SMA. The 8-week SMA right now is coming in at around 66.2K. So about $3,000 lower than the current price. As long as we're above that, the market is still cooking. And of course, we are moving into the halving. The halving is only a few weeks away. And I've said many times, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing again. You guys know my thoughts, but you guys see it, right? I mean, it's right. It's right here. Bitcoin dominance, 54.5%. You know, I've said before, I think it's going to 60%. And you know, it now just had the highest weekly close that it's had since April of 2021. Why is this important? Because, I'm glad you asked, right? Because it was last cycle precisely when alt Bitcoin pairs broke down that Bitcoin finally got a correction, okay? Now, have they broken down yet? No, they haven't. Look at this. You can see they rolled over here. They had a 4.5% drop. And then the third week, they closed below the range low. What happened this past week while I was gone? All Bitcoin pairs dropped a little over 4%. We're now in the second week. Okay? Now, think about it. A few weeks from now, the halving's going to be here. And if this plays out right here like this did, then in a week or two, all Bitcoin pairs are going to be back at their range lows. Right around the time of the halving. And ETH Bitcoin is already down there. You know, I don't think I haven't noticed. I might have been out of town, but I made sure to know where ETH Bitcoin was. 0.049. Still no weekly close below 0.049, but it's close, right? It's close. And the reason why this is important is because when they break support, right? When alt Bitcoin pairs break support, that is usually when the alt USD valuation starts to bleed. How many times have I said over the last 2 years? When this breaks support, that is the danger zone. That is the danger zone. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, look at what happened to Matic Bitcoin. See when it broke support, its first weekly close below 1,722 sats, the June 2022 low, since March 11th, the week of March 11th. What has Matic USD done since the week of March 11th? Right? It's just been going down. This is Matic USD, right? It was at a 129, and it's just been red ever since. So Watch ETH Bitcoin, because if it breaks support, it's likely going to be a risk-off time for ETH for a while. Hasn't broken yet, but it is dangerously close. And guys, with the narrative of the halving coming up in just a few weeks, with alt Bitcoin pairs rolling over here, I do think that alt Bitcoin pairs will break down. And if you look at individual altcoins and you see them breaking on their Bitcoin support levels, and then once they break their Bitcoin support levels, you see their USD valuations bleed. What do you think happens when collectively the altcoin market breaks down their Bitcoin support levels, right? And how do they break down? By these ongoing rallies that Bitcoin gets, right? Bitcoin rallies during quantitative tightening and high rates, they break alt Bitcoin pairs down, so that when Bitcoin finally rolls over below that 8-week SMA and goes back down to the 20-week SMA, unfortunately, the altcoin market has nowhere to hide, because during the Bitcoin rally, alt Bitcoin pairs broke down. And you're seeing it happen across the board, right? A lot of these alts are back down to the range lows, or they're getting pretty close. So I'm still going to stick to this. I do think it's important that the altcoin market is an important source of liquidity for Bitcoin. That's why we talk about it. And when they break, that's where that potential source dries up. Now there's still the other source, right? There's still the everyday person that's going to DCA it no matter what. There's the spot ETF stuff, but there's no denying that altcoins have been bleeding back to Bitcoin for a long time. And when they break support, the purchasing power of those alts go down. They haven't broken yet. But again, if it follows this right here, right, if it follows this move, kind of the same thing, then it means sometime in April they break down. It could be May, but I think there's a decent chance in April. And in fact, if you take a time here, like if you go look at how long it took for it to break down after putting in this wick low right there, it took 41 weeks. That's actually this week. Right, that'd actually be this week. Now, I don't know if it's going to happen this week or not. You can see on the second week after they rolled over here, it was a 10% drop, and it was the 41st week where they broke the range low. A 10% drop, even if all Bitcoin pairs were to drop 10% this week, that still doesn't break them down, right? So if you look at this, if all Bitcoin pairs break down 10%, they're still at 0.41, meaning then the following week, the third week of April, as we get really close to the halving, they could be potentially at support. All it's going to take, a slight move by Bitcoin, alt Bitcoin pairs break down, everyone celebrates, and then you get altcoins stuck in traffic on struggle street for a while, because now they've broken down off their Bitcoin support levels thanks to Bitcoin USD getting these sporadic rallies into the halving. And I've said before, I think that liquidity from the altcoin market is going to go back over to Bitcoin as we get into closer to the halving. I think that's the narrative. I don't think it makes one bit of a difference if the halving were in April or not. I think that alts are going to bleed back to Bitcoin either way. I think a lot of people are sort of, saying, well, the only reason ETH is breaking down is because, maybe the spot ETF. Guys, all that stuff is a narrative. It's been breaking down since December of 2021, and only now are people starting to believe it because it's now at the range lows. But if for anyone who cared to look for the last 2.5 years, it's been breaking down. Now, of course, it can be blamed on the spot ETF potentially getting rejected, but it's been breaking down for 2.5 years either way. And of course, there will be a reason that is sort of painted as the reason it broke down, but has it not been going down since 2021? And again, I think that will have implications for Bitcoin. I know a lot of you guys watching maybe are Bitcoin maxis, and you might wonder, why is he talking about Ethereum? Why the hell did he bring up Matic? Because the reason is because liquidity, it sort of sloshes around the cryptoverse, right? It goes to the king, to Bitcoin, to the altcoins, to the meme coins, to whatever, right? And as it sloshes around, it's important to try to figure out where it's going to go to next. And for the last several years, while there's pockets of the altcoin market that it goes to, there's no denying that Bitcoin dominance has been going higher the entire time. So while it sloshes around over there and maybe in this area over there, it still just keeps on bleeding back to Bitcoin, right? So as long as we're above the 8-week, the party goes on. If you start getting weekly closes below it, like we did in 2021 and 2019, it means the party is likely going to be over for a while, at least for a few months, right? You can see it both times. Now, in both cases, we bled here for about 3 months and we put in new highs. In this case, we bled for 9 months and we put in new highs. But once that happens, right? Once that bleed begins, that's where I think, people finally understand why I've been talking about all Bitcoin pairs for this entire time, because so far they don't really care because the altcoin market is up on its USD pair. But they're already starting to roll over on their USD pairs, some of them, and their Bitcoin pairs are looking pretty bad. So Bitcoin has been by far, in my opinion, the best place to be for the last 2.5 years. I'm not saying that some of the alts haven't outperformed it. They have. Congratulations if you held them. But a lot of them were high risk. And a lot of the ones that outperformed were only created a few months ago. And the ones that outperformed even, that were around the prior cycle, they're still below their all-time highs, right? So Bitcoin has put in new highs. A lot of the altcoin market has not. It's an important consideration here. It's an important consideration. So will Bitcoin rally beyond April, right? Will it be a rally beyond the halving? I think the answer to that question is going to be dependent on if alt Bitcoin pairs break down. If alt Bitcoin pairs break down in April, then I think you could get a summer correction. If alt Bitcoin pairs do not break down in April, then you might not. Or if maybe they break down in May. But it just kind of depends on how well the altcoins hold up, because I think the altcoin represents the average consumer, the average retail investor. And if the average retail investor can't keep alt Bitcoin pairs from breaking down, that means that the Fed has likely gone too far. And I know rate cuts are being pushed out till July now, but we'll see if they make it that long. Again, rate cuts being pushed out just means alts are going to keep on bleeding, because last cycle we saw dominance go up until rate cuts arrived, right? Until rate cuts arrived. So why should I assume that it would be any different, right? I mean, it was, in fact, even after rate cuts arrived, dominance continued to go up for a little bit. So again, I mean, if rate cuts keep getting pushed further and further out, it just means the alts are going to keep on bleeding to Bitcoin. Yes, some are outperforming. But that's the name of the game. We've been playing this game forever. I know everyone's been talking about dominance. I don't even know who else has been bullish on dominance. It seems like everyone, for the most part, other than Bitcoin maxis. I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, but I'm bullish on dominance. I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, though at this point, I don't know if I'm trying to convince you or me. My point has been that Bitcoin dominance is going up not because of fundamental stuff in say, Ethereum. It's because of monetary policy, and Ethereum is unfortunately higher risk than Bitcoin, therefore it bleeds to Bitcoin. Okay? And the way you preserve the social valuation of your portfolio during a high interest rate QT environment is to have a crypto portfolio be Bitcoin heavy, because everything bleeds back to, not everything, most things bleed back to the king. And you can see here, for everyone that said Bitcoin dominance was done, well, how do you explain that it just put in the highest weekly close since April of 2021? And for everyone who keeps saying ETH Bitcoin is holding up well, how do you explain that it just put in the lowest weekly close since April of 2021? Again, the process is playing out. It's been playing out forever. It's just been going really, really slow. Yes, if ETH was holding up better than it had in prior cycles at these points, but it is still bleeding, right? This is the lowest weekly close. It's all dubious speculation, right? It's not like I can know for sure what's going to happen. But I do think that Bitcoin will suck that liquidity out of the altcoin market. And then once that liquidity is gone, I think Bitcoin will get some form of a correction. It just depends on when that happens. And will it happen in April, May, June? I don't know. But my guess is whenever it does happen, I guess I would suspect that rate cuts are around the corner. So if it happens in April, then you probably get a rate cut in May or June. If it happens in May, then you probably get a rate cut in June or July. Okay, it just depends on when it happens, because I do think it will be sort of representative of the average retail, investor, sort of representative of the consumer. And it's interesting because if you actually go look at say like year-to-date ROI of Bitcoin in 2024, and you compare it to 2017 and or if it ever loads, but so 2024, if you compare it to 2017 and 2021, so these are both post-halving years, you can kind of see it's right in between them. What's interesting is if you take the average of 2017 and 2021. So these are both post-halving years. Take the average of that and overlay 2024, you'll see that 2024 is actually right at that average. You might say, well, why are you comparing 2024 to a post-halving year? Well, the reason is because if you look at 2023, it was actually more similar to halving years at the end of the day than it was pre-halving years. So if 2023 is more similar to a pre-halving year, maybe 2024 is more similar to a post-halving year. Of course, the last two post-halving years were very different from one another. 2021, you kind of had this thing going on. 2017, you obviously went up a lot more. If it follows, 2021 in the short term, as we said before, right? I mean, Bitcoin had sort of this final local top in April, which coincidentally would be about that third week of April, which is right around the time of the halving, which is potentially right around the time that all Bitcoin pairs break down. So again, there's a lot of confluence around, mid to late April, right? The third to fourth week of April. I would look to see where all Bitcoin pairs are. If they're still holding above 0.4 into May, then that means Bitcoin still has more fuel. If they're not holding above that level, if they're at 0.38, 0.37, it could very well mean we see a pullback by Bitcoin going into the summer, which is actually quite common. I mean, how often does that happen? It happens quite a lot. If you were to look at Bitcoin in 2021, right? We had a summer lull, right? We had a summer lull. It topped out, in fact, in April. What happened in 2013? We saw Bitcoin, guess when it topped out? In April, right? It topped out in April. Even last year, we had a significant top in April where we only swept the high in June, right? April is an important time, and so I don't know if it's going to take out this high or not, but it very well could. And if it does, and then you get a pullback and it goes below the 8-week SMA in May or something, then that could be very well sort of repeating something like that or something like that, okay? So just be aware that that could very well be in the future. And note that at least last cycle, when that risk-off time came, it was when Bitcoin dominance finally broke out, right as those rate cuts arrived, right? And we're getting pretty close, but they haven't happened yet. It hasn't happened yet, right? We need to get to 56%. If you want to be more specific, around 55.3%, but I just say 56% because let's get a little bit of clearance there. We know Bitcoin dominance can move very, very quickly. But it's all something to consider. So again, Bitcoin USD right now is still above the 8-week SMA. As long as it's above that, the party goes on. You can start getting weekly closes below that, then there could be some danger, especially if there's confluence with all Bitcoin pairs breaking down. And if you do get a weekly close below the 8-week SMA, there's a good chance you will go to the bull market support band, which right now is sort of in the mid-50s, approaching the mid-50s. So we'll see what Bitcoin has in store for April. My guess is it's going to break all Bitcoin pairs down in the coming weeks, and it will do whatever it needs to do in order to make that happen. And as we can see, the altcoin market just does what it continues to do best for the last 2.5 years, bleed back to the king. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Again, we are going to raise the prices on that for new subscribers to it after the halving. Right? So if you want to lock in the lower rate, make sure you do so, because we also have a sale going on as well. Make sure you do so before the halving, right? So you still have a few more weeks there. But anyways, we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Bye.